Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Gaming Stooges Talks podcast. We are the Gaming Stooges.
I'm Jack.
You can call me Cloud.
And I'm Landon.
We hope you enjoyed today's discussion, and if you do, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on Twitch, or joining our Discord. Let's get on with the show.
Games look good.
Uncharted 4.
So,
Uncharted 4.
today we're going to be talking
Uncharted
about
4.
the visual presentations in games. And this, at the end of the day, it boils down to, does game look good? And I guess these guys'
Does
answer
game
is
look good?
Uncharted 4 to that one.
Yeah.
But honestly, visual presentation in games can mean multiple different things. Now, usually the first thing that most people go to is the graphical quality and the art style. Like, those are like tied together. It's like, how does the game, how good are the graphics and does the art style look cool is usually the big thing. But I mean, there's multiple other things that go into it. There's what kind of UI elements, how do they look? How does the style of everything look all together as a single package? I think that more recently, there's also been a wave of, for retro games in particular, the idea of retro filters to make a game look closer to like what it would look like if you played it on the intended older displays. So you have and obviously there's games where you can turn on filters that are not quite that. So, you have different ideas of like what goes into like how a game looks visually speaking. So, I think I'll ask you guys just to start. Uncharted 4?
Uncharted 4.
Uncharted 4.
So, the joke with that is I started my new stream title last night, which happens to be Uncharted 4. And we just kind of a couple different times just commented on how good the game looks and brought up that, we have a podcast tomorrow that might be related to that. And we just kind of joked that, like, we should talk about nothing but Uncharted 4 for the entire podcast because this is, like, peak video game visuals. It's not really, but it looks really nice.
What would you say on like the graphics alone is the best looking game you've ever played?
Probably this one.
Probably Uncharted
honestly.
4.
It looks damn good. I mean, there's probably other games that look better than Uncharted 4, but I haven't played them.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pick one off the top of my head, like what is the best looking game? It's tough. There's some really good looking games.
Lexine's Quest is a generic RPG.
Yeah, that's definitely the best looking game I've ever played. Most fantastic visuals. I'm totally enthralled. No, I think if I had to like pick one, I guess I'd probably say like a mix of visual style and graphical quality would be Nier Automata. I think the visuals in that game look really, really nice, and I can get more into it because it isn't just the visuals like that we first see, like the main graphics that I like the presentation of, but that is a major factor. That or Spyro Reignited Trilogy. I do tend to praise that game a lot as well.
Landon?
Ah, shit. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me any questions and I could just sit here.
No, I'm supposed to do that today. It's just,
You just had the look.
The audio listeners are not going to get why that was funny.
The look on your face was exactly that of like a dog that doesn't quite know what's going on.
Yeah.
And it just kind of has this like, not like upset look on its face, but it just kind of has like a weird scowl and it just doesn't know what's happening.
God.
That's the look that you had.
Okay, so for a game that looks good, just blanket good looks good? Is that what we're just throwing out there into the world?
Just to start off our discussion when it comes to like the most basic observation that most people have when they say the dem graphics.
I mean, if we're going realistic camp, I think that, like, yeah, Uncharted 4 is a good-looking video game. I think Until Dawn, especially for the character design, does a really good job in that department.
Like the face animations.
Characters. Yeah. Because they really worked on the mocap for Uncharted 4 as well. They did kind of the same thing. Yeah. But if we're going more in a different route, like more stylistic in its approach, I would say I really like I really like Super Mario 3D World. I think that looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
Mario Kart 8 is another game that just looks really good. Like, all the courses are designed really well. And some of the stylings they do for effects play really nice. Like Sunshine Airport, one that all three of us enjoy a little bit.
A lot of
the lens flare when you fly out. It has
the lighting, the reflections, that is
that's a game that does that really well. So yeah, those are some more in a different way that games look good.
Yeah.
Just from a flat surface.
I think in general.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No.
I think in general, a lot of first-party Nintendo games are fall in the category of visually very impressive, in terms of art style and just visual design. You know, in terms of sheer graphical power, obviously it's not going to match up to something like Uncharted, but Super Mario Galaxy as another example, I just cannot fathom that that's a Wii game and that the second one is also a Wii game, because those games look so damn good for the Wii, and the fact that they both have this insane visual style and both run at 60 FPS for the whole game with no drops, it's pretty crazy.
Now, to add to that, do you guys really factor frame rate at all when thinking about the graphics? Because obviously that ties into the animation of the world and the game visually. So I mean, it ties in, but I mean,
I think
hear what you guys have to say.
I think I do, in a way. 30 or 60 doesn't really make too much of a difference to me as long as the game runs well. Obviously 60 is preferred, but I'm not going to lose my shit if a game runs at 30 FPS. As long as it's consistent.
Yeah.
When you get frame drops, that's when I start having a problem. Because something that people were shitting their pants about in the lead up to the release of the game, the Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door remake for the Switch. The original GameCube game runs at 60 FPS, but this one runs at 30. I'm going to be honest, I don't ever think about that when I play this game. It looks great regardless, and the animation is still really fluid, and it looks really fucking nice. It doesn't really make a difference in that regard.
I'll build off of that when I talk about another game, but to add to the whole Paper Mario Thousand Year Door thing, I think they kind of realized that Paper Mario is an RPG series. So it's not yes, it would be nice to have 60 FPS, but the frame rate, having a higher frame rate is easy to sacrifice if you're making everything else look better because of it. And because of the style that Paper Mario games are, art style wise, you don't really need the 60 FPS, because with 30 FPS you can still have the art style just lend to it looking good anyway, and being able to add more visual flair to the actual environments is better when you're playing a game like that, where the overworld is so important to pull you in.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one thing I wanted to mention. So I'm not really a stickler for 60 or 30 either way. Like Jack said, I think it's just more important that it is consistent and that it looks good in motion. I think a game that really manages to, for me anyway, put that into perspective is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, especially after they patched the game to be smoother, because there were spots where the frame rate like was not that great, and there's still like one area where it dips over in like the Kokiri Woods, but otherwise like the game play pretty much always rock solid 30 FPS, and like the pace of the game, the animations of how everything moves, like the leaves in the trees, the grass, like I don't really care that it's 30 FPS. Like everything still looks really nice even without going to like a full 60. So I think that's one game that like, and the art style for it, I mean, it is a little more towards the realistic side. I do like games that have more like bombastic art styles. I'll talk about that more later, but like I think it just looks good with the mesh of like the style that they went with, plus just how everything animates. I think that's more important than the frame rate itself.
I'm going to bring up something that Al mentioned in the chat. He says Mario Wonder has a really nice style, and I agree. Mario Wonder does have a great art style and just a great visual style in general. It looks really nice for a 2D Mario, and it has a lot of really like striking areas like visually. And unfortunately, this is like semi-related to a tweet that I saw earlier today that just said like, man, New Super Mario Bros. Wii kind of looks like dog shit, like has no visual flair whatsoever. And I wouldn't necessarily say it looks like dog shit, but when you compare it to something like Super Mario Wonder, yeah, it doesn't look great. And like the colors are really like dull, and the environments are all pretty basic, and there's nothing really like too crazy going on pretty much ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, it's like when games try to like rip the same art style, it can kind of just get washed down. And
yeah,
it's not even just a New Super Mario Brothers thing, it's just an industry thing. Like, you know how many indie games I feel would be actually more successful if they weren't just ripping the art style from like another game? Because like that's a whole shtick that like some games try to go for, is like, it looks like this game but it's not. And
yeah,
it's like a game can look great while like mimicking another game, but it doesn't have to look like that other game. It could look, have its own style. I think that's why like when we see games that look the same, like New Super Mario Brothers, the New Super Mario Brothers Wii, the New Super Mario Brothers 2, like it got really repetitive. And like New Super Mario Brothers U, it had that same problem, but it at least had more imaginative. It had like a full overworld that was like connected, and it was more visually striking than the one for Wii.
The thing about like it, Jesus, I can't speak. I think it's literally just like an issue with like lighting and colors, because in terms of environments, there's not too much different between U and Wii in the New Super Mario Brothers games, but like U looks so much better just because like just the colors are just a little bit more vibrant, and
it
the
has
environments just to look a little bit nicer. And part of that is because it's the Wii U being a much more powerful system than the Wii, but
I mean, they didn't necessarily have to add those extra visual flares in, and just doing that at least gave it like some elevation.
I mean, obviously both of them pale in comparison to Wonder, but still.
Yeah, because Mario Wonder is doing two things. One, it's having a new art style that is a shift to the side slightly from what we had been expecting, but it also does do what we were getting at with New Super Mario Bros. U, where like there's more lighting and color effects that make it so that it looks, and like just the animations, there's a lot more to it. They're more cartoony and more exaggerated. Like a lot of people would show like the frame of animation where Mario is like running, but like there's like an after image shoe, and it's like that looks good in motion though. It has this weird, it's just because of the way our eyes perceive it. So like it looks better in motion than it does when you pause the frame, and I think that's more important.
Have you ever seen the smear screens for like cartoons and anime?
Yeah. The way
Yeah.
when a character like moves like their arm really fast, and then you'll just have like a frame that's just like a smear from one end to the other.
Yeah.
It's like that.
It's essentially that. And I love when people just like screenshot just the smear and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what awful animation!" It's like it's a single still frame. You dummy.
It's like that's actually how animation works. Is when you want to portray motion and you want to exaggerate it, you add those weird things in so that when everything is blended together, it looks better in motion. Like that's the whole thing.
That's literally what happens when I move my hand. You can't perceive every single individual frame.
Right.
Exactly. You're not God. Get out of here.
Our eyes are seeing your hand at a bunch of different points, and then just basically putting everything together. Our mind is putting everything together in our heads,
filling in the blanks.
Exactly. It's filling in the blanks as you go. So yeah, that's the whole thing about frames. I don't think that they're actually as important as a lot of like PC, especially PC elitists like to make it out to be. They're like, oh, this game's got to be 144 frames per second. It's like your eyes can't see even half of that. Come on.
I will say
I can't see more than 2 frames.
I will say there are some like genres of games where a higher frame rate is necessary. Like obviously you want that for like a fighting game, or a very like something like Counter-Strike where it's very like you have to react very quickly. And,
highly action-oriented games like
not even just like all shooters, because I feel like Call of Duty. Actually, no, Call of Duty was in 60. Halo. A lot of Halo games are in 30 FPS and they still play fine. When like everyone deals with the same frame rate, then
Yeah.
But it makes more sense for something with a lot of like Twitch reactions to have. But I don't want.
What was the frame rate on the Borderlands games, by the way?
0. Oh, sorry, that was the Borderlands 2 for the Vita.
On consoles it was 30, but on PC it goes up to 60.
Yeah, we played Borderlands 2 on PS3 when we were playing it, and I never had any issues. Like, it wasn't a problem for me.
Sometimes the game would lag a little bit, but it was never like a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Well, you also throw in like internet connection between four people.
Because I was gonna say I played it by myself quite a bit after when like I was waiting to be able to play with us again on a different character, and like I didn't really have slowdowns, and I never even once felt like the frame rate was anything like even resembling an issue. Like it was perfectly smooth, and like the visual, the way that the style of like the dark cell like comics shading and everything, just it looks perfectly fine. I didn't need the 60 FPS. It looked really good, and everything was smooth anyway.
Do you guys know that it's been a decade since we stopped playing that game?
Yeah. One day, I hope we should just the 3 of us should just go in and just pick up where we left off.
Because honestly, like the thing was, we were just waiting.
Do we play it on?
PS4. We all installed it on our PS4 and updated our saves to that, right?
I think so.
But then I have to buy PlayStation Plus.
Yeah.
True.
Al? Hi.
We just need to buy it for like...
just hi?
We just need to buy it for like 3 months or something.
Landon's like, ew. Giving Sony money?
They should pay me to use their service. It's so bad.
It was a lot easier to play when Plus was... Well, when you didn't need Plus to play online.
Oh, yeah. I loved that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, and back then, I paid for Plus because it was actually like
a good deal.
Yeah, it
like
was
you could actually get like a solid amount of free games from Plus.
How much is Plus nowadays? I believe a year of the
80,
base
right?
version is $80.
Yep.
That's fucking stupid. It used to be 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And then they upped it, and then they upped it again.
And now it's 80, and the 80,
there's 3 tiers,
and the $80 tier
There's
gives
3
you
tiers,
and the $80 tier now gives you less value than the $60 tier from last generation and the $50 tier from the generation before that. So like,
yeah, that's where we're
I
at.
don't know how you figure that, but that's what Sony's doing. That's Sony math, big brain.
I mean, that's Sony and Microsoft math, because Microsoft's doing the same.
To get
thing.
back to our topic, though, Landon, did you have anything to add about the whole frame rate versus just visuals overall?
I was really hoping you would ask me, what do you think about FPS? And I was going to say, I don't care about the number of first-person shooters in my games. So that bit's over. I got to tell my joke just very poorly.
Damn, I'm surprised you didn't tell him, you didn't say, I don't really feel like talking about Super Smash Brothers this podcast. We talked about that podcast back. But
anyway,
we again look another awkward look at me for that the audio listeners are not going to see.
We brought up Borderlands, and we could move on to cell shading and how that's cool.
So that's kind of like a big thing, and I think we're probably going to have quite a lot of games to talk about with this. But cell shading is kind of a way for developers to just make a game pop by adding like a cartoonish layer to the graphics, because usually the graphics are very textureless, and they when you add the textures in, a lot of the time they'll just have like basic stuff, but like cell shading is like a whole thing. Like they adds it's kind of hard to explain, but
it just adds a lot of visual flair that a game wouldn't otherwise have.
It's been around for a while. What would you say is like the first game with cell shading that like really that you remember really well?
I want to say cell shading, like in general, started around like Dreamcast era.
Well, like the first your first experience though.
Oh,
because like each of us is gonna have a different one.
Probably Wind Waker.
I would probably say, there's probably been some like other ones, but I think it's Dark Cloud 2 is like the major one for me, because Dark Cloud 2 does actually have cell shading. But I mean I've probably played something else that had a similar thing on like the PlayStation 1 that I'm just not remembering.
I don't know what the first cell shaded game was, but it was probably Jet Set Radio, if I had to guess. There's probably one before that.
I was gonna say, I have a feeling
it's the oldest one I know of.
I have a feeling that there's a couple before Jet Set Radio. You just want to give the prize to Jet Set Radio.
Listen, it's genuinely the oldest game I can think of.
It's one of the oldest ones.
Landon, that utilizes it.
Landon, are you also on Wind Waker, or you got a different game that you can remember?
Cell shading is the first one I can think of, but I was actually just gonna go and see what was like one of the oldest in video gaming.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia list for cell shaded games, and Jet Set Radio is the second game on the list, after a PS1 game called Fear Effect, which I've never heard of.
When did Fear Effect come out?
February of 2000.
Depending on when that was actually revealed, Jet Set Radio might actually be the oldest known, because when it was revealed in 1999 at the Tokyo Game Show, like that's
there you go,
as a big one. So
fun fact: Jet Set Radio might actually be
the oldest known cell shaded game.
Listen, I might be biased, but
I actually would have expected there to be like something further back. But
I'm not surprised, because isn't there a large number of like older PS1 games that are like more focused on strict polygons to make a more realistic looking game, or just sprites in general?
Yeah, sort of. Honestly, I think for PS1 it was more like they used sprites more than they tried to go for cell shading, and I think that was more like a power issue. I think the systems at the time weren't able to handle that extra layer that cell shading requires, so maybe that was it. I know that N64 never bothered because it was like all polygons for a lot of games, with some games using sprites when they needed to like pull back.
The third game on the list is Looney Tunes Space Race, also on the Dreamcast.
There you go.
Hey, guess what?
What?
Cloud has to play that game.
There you go. It's another kart racer.
No!
Cloud.
It has race in the name.
No!
Literally under genre on Wikipedia, it says Looney Tunes Space Race is a 2000 kart racing video game.
I don't hear you. I don't hear you.
Published by Infogrames.
We're talking about visual presentation in games. I don't want to hear about kart racers.
Hey, guess what the fourth one is?
God damn it.
It's Sonic Shuffle.
Ew.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, Al,
Yeah.
can you clip when Jack mentioned the racing game, and so we can just throw that at Cloud for all eternity? Thanks.
God.
Oh,
You don't
but
have to.
we have another one. Wacky Races starring Dastardly and Muttley for the Dreamcast.
There's another one for you, baby. Let's go. So many. I would say the first one that really stood out to me was the Wind Waker. That's the first one I can think of that I played that had cell shading. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of cell shading has rarely looked bad in video games, I think.
I think honestly it helps a game look better over time, and I know one series that has been able to stay visually appealing because it went to cell shading was Dragon Quest, actually. Dragon Quest 8 looks fantastic still today, and that was a game that incorporated a lot of cell shading for the character models, and I think it worked really well.
Two things, since we moved on to Dragon Quest. I have an image that literally someone texted me that I'm just going to show
On camera.
on camera. And two, while I'm getting that set up, because I have to figure out how to do anything. I'm an old man. I don't know if anyone knows this. I'm just so old now, I don't know how phones work. Portrait. Is Dragon Quest looks so damn good. It does not matter the game, because they were able to take Toriyama art and turn it into video game graphics. And part of that has to do with this image. I don't know if the viewers at home can see it.
That's interesting. So Dragon Quest is rounded blots, and Final Fantasy is jagged edges.
Think about that. Think about that for a second. Because, the slime, the default creature you fight, the slime from Dragon Quest, is not what you think a slime would be. He is, he's a round guy. He's a round guy. Now, he does have a pointy top, but still, he's a round guy.
It's a rounded, pointy top.
Actually, I think that, I know, I don't want to get too, deep into the weeds here on this, but
We're doing it.
I do see that as a thing where, a visual presentation, and this is not just for games, but just things in general, when something is easier to decipher in your mind when you look at it, it can be more visually appealing, and a lot of the time rounded objects usually have that, it registers in our brain as we can identify it better. When you have all those jagged edges, sometimes jagged edges, especially if there's a lot of angles to them, a lot of different kind of points, it can kind of get noisy in a way, so it makes it harder to really kind of clasp onto details and be oh, I can remember that image. And no, I totally get that, especially when Final Fantasy was moving to the PS2 and beyond. They kind of, rather than try to have a coherent art style, they were just going more and more complicated. So that kind of does make a lot more sense now that you
I'd say that even happened with Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah,
Looks very jagged. That's how I would describe that game.
I would say that.
Watch out for those pointy bits.
I would say that Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 at least got by, and this is something that a lot of PlayStation 1 RPGs had to do, where they didn't have fully 3D environments. they would use basically a rendered background that is supposed to be like just one big image, and then they just parallaxed the movement over that image, so it looks like you're moving through it, but
it's just a stretched JPEG.
But they're usually, because it's one image, usually they are able to add a lot of detail to it. It can usually look good, and it's part of what like makes the games like still have a visual style that like you can kind of grab onto. That's why I mostly said Final Fantasy X onward, like the PS2, is like because they abandoned that and they went to just full 3D everything.
For sure.
So like it did get worse, but I think no, you do have a point where it kind of started with Final Fantasy VII, but it definitely gets, you know, it accelerates starting with the PS2 era, and
they just push on that gas. They're just like, let's go. But no, I think for like an art style that is very consistent, like Dragon Quest is many things, and one of those things is very consistent with its art style, because they basically just took the formula of like, here's Akira Toriyama's like character designs and shit, and they're just like, okay, forever.
And then one thing I noticed with Dragon Quest is that with in terms of like UI to like add into that, because like the Dragon Quest games are like an adventure, and they always had this idea of you're saving your game through an adventure log. They just kind of went full blown with that, and the UI elements are supposed to look like you're flipping through an adventure book. So like they just kind of really compiled all of their ideas into like one focused vision. So you've got the Toriyama style, you've got the adventure book aesthetic with the UI elements, and it just comes together really well.
I think they're pretty games. I can't wait for Dragon Quest 1 through 3. Jack's going to buy them, and we're going to review them all. Thanks.
Speaking of... God, I'm just looking down the list of, like, cel-shaded video games on Wikipedia, and there's just so many good games here.
He's still on there.
Family Guy, the video game,
Never
was
heard of
cel-shaded. But more importantly, the thing I was going to say was that just about every single Dragon Ball game is on here.
Yeah.
Or at least like
True.
every game made in the past like 20 years.
Yeah, it started with Budokai 2 was like the major one, because even Budokai 1 didn't use it. I think there might have been one other one before Budokai, maybe, but it was definitely Budokai 2 that like kind of catapulted the use of cel shading, and they've used it in the Tenkaichi games. They used it in Xenoverse. They had Arc System Works did a beautiful manga cel shading style to fighters. Like that's how they managed to get the animation looking so fluid as it does. So yeah, no, it's a style that really suits Akira Toriyama's style. Moved into games, and like that's why Sandland has a good style.
Looks there. I will say, there are times when Sandland looks, especially during cutscenes, when it like falls a little flat. Because at that point you're just like character standing, talking, animation. Other characters start talking.
So like the animation is like really stiff and like disjointed.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Is it kind of like the Fire Emblem Three Houses thing, where like in cutscenes, a lot of the characters have like stock animations that they just cycle through?
Yeah, and then they'll like pause like in that frame until like it's their turn again to talk, and then like continue.
And that's such a common. It's such a common thing, but like the more detailed graphics get, the more jarring it looks.
Yeah.
The other thing I really love is sometimes the lighting, like really affects, like the characters. Like there's sometimes where they'll like rock a little bit for whatever animation they have, and then you can see like a shadow spot that just like grows and shrinks as they do that.
Or like when a shadow effect has like a jagged like movement back and forth because it doesn't have like a frame of reference to just smoothly go between the two. So like
there's that too.
So like you might see like maybe like their hair is like got like one part that comes out, and like there's a shadow effect that's supposed to like go this way, but then like they're moving, so like it goes that way and then it goes that way. It's definitely a thing.
I just wanted to point out that I just opened Twitter, and literally the very first thing that I see is the image that Landon just showed on his phone. Like the first thing at the very top.
The Dragon Quest versus Final Fantasy plot.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's where the person who sent that me got it from.
Probably.
They just like pooped it on me. But I mean, I thought it was just funny that he texted that to me while we're having a visual presentation conversation.
Oh, he did that during.
Like, oh, yeah.
He did that right now during this podcast. That's great.
He did that during the podcast.
That's fantastic. I got into it when I was talking about Dragon Quest, but let's build off that. UI elements in games. That is part of a game's visual presentation. We don't always talk about it a whole lot. Usually, the main thing that we're preoccupied with is just how good the game itself looks. But the way that you interact with the game through menus or through the visual indicators on screen, like that's still pretty important. Because if it doesn't look good, it can be kind of jarring. Obviously, there's going to be like games that are going to be pointed out like right away when it comes to UI that really helps the visual style of a game. You got Persona 3, 4, and 5 in particular, where they are built. They are built with the UI to aid the visuals in mind, obviously. But I'm sure there's others that we can all come up with as well. Jack, did you have an example? Because I mean, I have one right off the top of my head as well.
I'm trying to think. Because, like, Persona 5, I feel like, is the obvious example. Yeah. Not that Persona 5, like, invented UIs or anything, but, like, it really did feel like a nice change of pace where, like, a game, like, puts that much effort into the UI just looking really, really nice. It's just something that I feel like a lot of companies just kind of ignore. Like, just the visual flair on the user interface. But I'm kind of blanking off the top of my head. I'll get back to me. So
the game that I was going to talk about was actually going back to Nier Automata. Nier Automata has this thing where and it's not perfect, but it has an aspect where all of the visual elements, like the UI elements that you're seeing on screen, are designed in a way that it's supposed to look like the characters that you're playing as could be observing them themselves, since they're androids. So you have all of these like computer-esque style to it. It's kind of hard to explain because there's frames of animation for all the moving elements that make it look, like Matrix-y kind of look to it, I guess, would probably be the best way to explain it, as it kind of like has like a Matrix vibe. But you get that with like the heads-up display just when you're out exploring. When you open up the pause menu, you've got the same thing going on there, the same style of like Matrix-y graphical elements for the maps, the stats screen, all of that. So I like games that do that. I don't think it's required that it's always like that. Sometimes UI just needs to look nice to get by, but like when a game is able to really just kind of combine the UI elements into the flavor of the game, I think it can go a long way.
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World has a pretty solid UI.
How would you describe
That's the
it?
only...
I've never actually seen
just very like blocky and pixely, and it just kind of like matches the 16-bit art style. It's like very like it goes all in on the fucking like video game aesthetic. With it being a game based on a movie, based on a comic. I don't know. Go watch the VODs. We streamed that game one time. But I don't know. I'm struggling to think of a lot of answers for UI specifically.
That does remind me, though, of like Sonic Mania, where Sonic Mania had a UI that was like reminiscent of the older Sonic games, particularly Sonic 3, since that is a game that has a lot of actual menus to go through before you jump into
Sonic
the game.
Mania is a good example.
Yeah, so it's like it's supposed to look like all the splash screens that you could see in the game, but there's just more fluidity to like how the screens transition between, and I think that's excuse me. I think that's really nice is when the UI elements kind of really like obvious, like for long running series more in particular, they're able to like call back to like a previous style and just kind of like refine it and make it look nicer. I think it, because obviously people that play games like that, part of their enjoyment's going to come from nostalgia. So when you can kind of like fine tune the visual experience to add to that nostalgia, it can just kind of, it just adds more to the package, I think.
Oh, you know what? I thought of a good example of good UI, or at least just like visually pleasing UI that's just kind of like it fits the theme of the game. The early Guitar Hero games have a really like unique UI design.
Yeah, it's got that cool like grungy like kind of like you've got like the torn papers and sheets that have like the lists of songs and stuff.
I forget if it's 1 or 2. I want to say 2, where the pause menu is just like a dude's fist, and you have like the options on like the back of his hand.
Yeah, like that's so cool. It's like he's got like he tatted the menu onto his arm. Like they just...
Actually, he's wearing a glove, so it's not like literally tattooed onto him, but like just the fact that the pause menu is just this dude's fist is just I love that.
Yeah, it's like it's in your face, so it really like it pops.
Mm-hmm. And like all of the aesthetic is all like fucking flames and dragons and guitars and motorcycles.
It's
and shit.
metal.
And it's just like
fuck.
Yeah, it's cool. Let's see. Did you have anything to add, Landon?
Oh shit! I would be asked a question.
I'm looking at Landon too.
Fuck. So a series I like. It's not necessarily just the UI, but the UI does get played into it, is the Pit Trip games. Because as you do better in those games, especially the later games where they add more, like, ranks to go up and down in, the music changes, but then also the visuals will change.
Oh, yeah,
and
you're right.
if you go down to, like, Nega, the, like, lowest, like, you're about to lose, like, you lose not only just all of the music besides any, like, things you hit, but, like, the entire screen goes black and white. Like, all of the elements just kind of, like lose any color.
Yeah,
and
I get what
it
you're
just
saying.
plays into, like, what you're doing. And then as soon as you, like, reach back up into, like...
You have, like, a...
whatever the...
Yeah, you have, like, a rainbow strobing effect to, like, kind of signify that, like, you're doing so well that the colors are bleeding everywhere. It's got...
Yeah.
I remember that.
The games, like, a lot of the games have, like, that sort of effect where the actual visuals of the game, like, change as you do well or do worse, which is something I like. And then I like the start menu and then all of the, like, advertisements that Runner 2 has, because it has, like, a very neat flat style for the graphics, but it's, like, very clean and cut, and they do a lot of nice work with the colors. Yeah, I just like that game. It looks good. Runner 2. It's on the Switch. Go buy it. Thanks.
All right. So yeah, we were talking about the UI elements in games, and I think there's a lot of games that, like, the UI elements, they look good, but, like, they don't necessarily, like, tie into the core experience. Like, I think I would really enjoyed the UI elements of Bravely Default, but, like, they're not necessarily adding to the game. They just look nice. You have other games where the visual elements, you know, they look fine even if they don't add anything. Like, I remember playing, like, old like Twisted Metal Black. It has a very distinct style to it, but I wouldn't say that, like, the user interface elements, like checking the enemies, like, information up on the top, or, like, even the loading screens, which have a style to them, where they also add quotes from, like, all the characters, like, it kind of adds a little bit to like the style, the vibe of the game overall, but it doesn't necessarily, if like you changed it, I don't think it necessarily take anything away, but it looks cool because it's adding to like this dark, gritty vibe that the game's going for. It's kind of like how Jack was talking about the Guitar Hero games, where it's like they could have went with something more basic, and I don't think anything would have been lost, but it is nice to have because it just adds. It does. I guess what I was saying is it adds, but it doesn't necessarily add. Like it's not necessary, but it still adds. Because I guess we were talking about games where like it feels like a necessary thing, but there's also games where it doesn't feel necessary, but it is a nice add.
I'm gonna disappoint Jack really quick, and a game or games that the UI gets in the way. It's Xenoblade Chronicles.
No, you're right. I mean, I don't know how bad it is in 1 and 3, but Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has an extremely cluttered UI, and it is so difficult to decide. That game is damn near unplayable in handheld just because of all of the things you have to look at. Like, it is. It
is. I think, so I've spent a lot of time on both the Wii and the Switch version. I don't know how that game's playable on the 3DS. I don't know if they, put most of the UI in the second screen or what, but...
I hope so.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah. And then X and 2 are, the ones I have the most time with.
X is the worst one, honestly.
X is so worse. It is probably the worst just because there's a lot going on. Yeah. The bottom, the gamepad screen does not help with that because there's a lot going on that. And then the text is so small. It's so
tiny.
It's so funny.
It's so tiny. I never thought that the UI really got in the way in Xenoblade 1. I mean, it's not great, but it never really impaired the experience. But Xenoblade X is bad.
It's
I think bad.
I think all of the Xenoblades it's a little messy.
Yeah.
Now, I love them. I absolutely love them. It just takes a while to get used to the UI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Compared to other games, which is unfortunate. And I think it detracts from them. Something actually I just thought of. I like the Legend of Heroes, especially Cold Steel 3 and 4. They have all of when you're in battle. They show you all the prompts of what the character can do, but it's all tied to the button you're going to press on the controller. It's all tied to
okay.
If it's here, if it's up, you're gonna press triangle or whatever. You just press that. So it's pretty clean. They kind of borrowed a lot from Persona. When they were designing the UI, they even said that in interviews. They're yeah, we just kind of looked at especially in Persona 5 when they have these are the things you can do, and it has the buttons.
There's shortcuts to the different options.
Yeah, it's sort of they kind of did a similar thing, and that I like a lot because it cleans up the stuff. I love the wheel from Cold Steel 1 and 2, and then older games, but it gets a little clunky when you're I want to go to this thing, and it's on the other side of the map, whereas or the wheel, whereas Cold Steel 3 and 4, you just press whatever button you want.
I was gonna say, I think I remember having that thing come up when I was playing Cold Steel 1. I was am I on the right icon? And sometimes I wasn't sure. And I think that was really one of my only sticking points too. I wouldn't say that the UI is bad, but there is a few moments where it is a little just a little confusing.
I do. So the sidebar showing you where characters are, I feel that works really well in the Cold Steel games, and the previous games is a little different, but it's still sidebar. You kind of know what you're doing. But Yeah, it's like they really cleaned it up. Cold Steel 3, Cold Steel 4, and I assume Reverie uses the same thing. I haven't got a chance to play it yet, but Al in the comments will let us know because he is the now definitive Trails fan. I've been kicked out.
I will say, now that you had mentioned Xenoblade Chronicles when it comes to like UI that's like really messy and confusing. If there is one series of games that I've played that I think I can actually say for sure has some messy UI, would definitely be the Neptunia games, because there's a lot of information. Like, I don't know if you've ever taken just like looked at a screenshot of like the in battle like scene, but they cram a lot of information. Like up top, you've got like whatever enemy unit you're focusing on, like their name, their HP bar, and it's in like this little like window. And then up in the upper right, you've got like the turn order and like who's gonna go when. And then below that, you've got like the menu for like the different things you can do, and it'll gray out stuff that you can't do because you can freely move the characters around. And then of course, because you can freely move the characters around, they have to show you the range that they can move in, and there's like this highlighted circle of movement. And then below that, you've got all the characters and all their like stats and everything. So there's a lot to take in. I don't think it's as bad as Xenoblade, but then that's just the battle UI. And then when you get into like the menus, particularly when you're going to like towns, because one of the things in the Neptunia games is when you're in like the main towns, you can do like crafting items and buying items, and the menus will display so much information between like the list of things you can use, like the quantity, and there'll be like other aspects, and like they throw all this information at you, and the font is usually kind of small. So it's kind of a lot. It's one of those games where like you have to adapt to how much the game is just trying to show you at once in order to really get a hold of everything.
That's so. I unfortunately don't know enough about the topic, but I think accessibility options like play a lot into this, and like that just sounds like an accessibility nightmare. Like, how do you get people to be able to play that?
It's
when they have visual impairments and stuff.
Exactly. And like that's one series that does not have those. So like
it sucks because there's a lot of fun games out there, and sometimes developers just don't think about like, all right, someone who can't see well or doesn't see certain colors, and there's just those people are kind of screwed if they want to enjoy the game, unfortunately.
Yeah, like it was so bad that in Hyperdimension Neptunia Mark II, because of how they had displayed all of the information, the font they chose, that was what caused me to be able to like ask my parents when they were upgrading their TV if I could have the old one, because my TV was a flat screen CRT and I was hooking my PS3 up by composite cable. I literally could not read this game sometimes. And like
that's just gross.
I was standing like 2 feet away from the screen, still could not make out some of the text. Like it was fixed when I went HD, but there was still obviously like if you were someone that has some sort of visual impairment, it's tough. Yeah. Jack, did you have anything to add when it comes to like games that have had that kind of like messy UI that you can think of, or because I do have one last point to hit on.
God, I remember when it's been a while, so I don't even 100% remember if it's that bad, but I remember when I briefly played Mass Effect 2 back in the day, I thought the UI in that game was a fucking mess, and it was hard to navigate the menus, honestly. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I remember that being like a turnoff for me when I played that game.
Yeah. All right, so the last...
other than that, there wasn't really too much else that I could think of.
The last thing I wanted to hit on, and it was something I mentioned all the way back near the beginning, is that a lot of games, both either retro-inspired or literally re-releases of old games, there's been a thing where developers have been putting visual options in the game in order to like add to the retro aesthetic. Games that come to mind, obviously, I've been playing the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. They have the option to change the font from something that looks like butt ugly PSP basic user interface font into something more like retro inspired. It looks more like the like Game Boy Advance font, and then between that, the UI elements being a uniform version of the old Final Fantasy 1 through 6 windows. Plus you can add a classic filter, so it will blur the image and it will add scan lines, but it also adds like the weird pink and blue bleeding of pixels that you would get from an actual CRT, so the colors actually blend together better. Because one thing I noticed is that with old games that are pixel based, they can sometimes not translate well when they're taken out of a CRT and put onto more modern displays, because the CRT developers have built around the CRT. So like they would make a sprite and they would base it on what you would see when you were playing it on a CRT. There was an image floating around that makes a perfect example. Chrono Trigger. If you just look at Chrono's portrait from the menu and you look at it on a CRT or you look at it on a modern display, you can see that the CRT was meant to blend all those pixels together and make it look more like a coherent image. And then if you try to look at the like there's a little bit of depth and shadowing to it, but if you look at it on a more modern display, it just looks very flat and it doesn't look like it was meant to. So I like when like games get re-released and like they add that extra like filtering option in, so like it looks more like it's intended. Another series that did a really good job of this, not quite to the extent of the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, but the Mega Man Legacy Collection, 1 through 6, they have that scanline option, and even though it blurs the image slightly, I think it looks so much better that way. Like the pixels blend better, it doesn't look as flat when you're playing it, and that just makes the frames of the limited frames of animation when you're playing, they just look smoother and they look better because of that added filtering. And I don't know, I'm a sucker for it now. I'm all in for games that like have good filtering options to make the game look nicer. And I know I just kind of mentioned just like pixel based games, but I'm sure that there's other games that have like that sort of thing going for them in different ways.
I hate it when developers give me options.
Why? Why do you hate options?
Choice is an illusion.
Oh. So I guess you don't like accessibility options after all either.
Fuck.
He's looking at me like, I got him. He said something earlier.
Well,
now I got to call it out.
Well, so anyway,
Jack, bail him out.
What was the topic again?
Uncharted 4.
Oh, Uncharted 4. Uncharted 4.
Uncharted 4.
You know what game looks so good when you have the filters on, i.e. motion blur turned up to 10?
Oh my god.
Uncharted 4.
Uncharted 4. It's crazy. Like, last night when I was playing the game and I was like, man, this game looks worse than I remember. And then I go into the menu and I notice, motion blur is turned all the way up to 10. And then I dropped it to out of 10. And then I dropped it down to 0 and I'm like, it looks 1,000 times better. I
will admit, like, motion blur is like a thing in games that, like, I don't know why they insist on adding it everywhere. It doesn't always look bad, but it generally never looks as good as just not having it.
It's supposed to be cinematic, but it looks worse by just, like, blurring the fucking backgrounds when, like, the camera moves around.
Right.
It just...
And it's one of those things where, like, obviously that kind of effect looks good in a movie, but when you have to actually interact with the medium, you have to have a better sense of everything around you. You need a better sense of environment, and that gets taken away from the motion blur. Like, I remember when I was doing the Let's Play for the Spyro Reignited trilogy, originally the game's released without a motion blur toggle, and they had motion blur. And I remember Jack was like, "That is disgusting. I hate that." And then I toggled the motion blur off because they had added a motion blur option later down the line. And I will admit, I like the game better from a visual standpoint with it off, because Spyro Reignited trilogy looks fantastic. The art style is great. It's a wonderful callback plus added detail to the PS1 versions, and I want to be able to see everything really clearly at all times. The motion blur totally ruins that game.
I do remember, like, that game does look really good, but I do remember being annoyed with how much motion blur there is in that game before they added in the option to turn it off, because it was the same for Uncharted 4. Originally, there was no option to turn it off until they patched it in because people complained about it.
Yeah. Adding motion blur to video games, big mistake, developers.
Was a mistake. It really was.
Don't do it. We just want the games to look nice and know what we're looking at. So, anything else, though, on the note of, like, visual options like that, like filters and added effects?
Not really too much, honestly.
All right. Well, this has been a pretty interesting topic, and I don't really think we've gone over pretty much everything we can. This is the point in the podcast where Landon can get up and go get food or snacks or anything he wants, because
and he's off.
And he is off to the races. He didn't even hesitate. So
no.
Thank you, everybody who's tuned into our podcast. As usual, we have a patreon.com/GamingStooges. You can find us with a Silver Stooge tier of $3. That gives you access to our polls where you can help decide the content that we're going to make in the future. And, of course, it gives you, it's just a nice thank you, as it helps us out a lot because we put this out to multiple platforms. Hosting it on different sites does cost a little bit of money. So being able to pitch in does matter. So thank you all. The $6 Gold Stooge tier, as always, you get extra perks. Namely, you get a Patreon shout out every month, every podcast episode rather, so twice a month. And of course, we've got Pixel Vixen as per usual still on that. Thank you, as always. And if you subscribe to the Gold Stooge tier, you get a ton of exclusive content. There are so many videos that we have put on Patreon itself that, if you just go on your Patreon app, go look up Gaming Stooges. We got a lot you can check out for the added couple bucks a month. And we're coming out with a really cool Patreon exclusive later this month. It'll probably be out a little bit after this episode goes out to all the other platforms, like Spotify and everything else. So, look forward to that. Of course, we've got Twitch. We've all been streaming lately. Jack, what have you been streaming?
Well, recently, last week, I just finished the Pokemon Emerald Hardcore Nuzlocke. It was a success. We beat Wallace, and when that was over, I moved on, and last night we just started Uncharted 4. So tune into that when we stream that. Let's see. Cloud, you're still doing Lexine's Quest.
Yep, I've been streaming Landon's game, Lexine's Quest. We've been running into a couple oversights here or there, and he's been putting in the work to patch the game as we go, to fix whatever major issues come up so I can play through all of that. And we're getting pretty far in. So
there will be no public version of this patched game.
No. That's funny too, because I had mused over that idea when I was the only one streaming one day, and I was like, it'll be interesting to see if Landon decides to re-release the game after I'm done. I guess that answers that question.
No. You are playing the only playable version of this game, and I will delete Lexine's Quest afterwards.
Oh, cool. So,
vaporware.
No.
I get to post it on Internet Archive and feel like I've contributed to society.
Now that the fucking stream series, well, like, once the stream series concludes, Lexine's Quest ceases to exist.
Nah.
It's the only way you need to experience Lexine's Quest is the journey.
I'm preserving Lexine's Quest on Internet Archive for all to enjoy.
Lennon is still playing currently Dragon Warrior Monsters is on hiatus while Landon grinds. But just last week he started the Oregon Trail.
Let me talk about that. So we're playing the latest version of the Oregon Trail on the Nintendo Switch, and it's actually really fun. We have in our current party, I was almost pissed because you choose the characters and they have pre-selected names. And I was like, I don't want these names. What the fuck? And then after you choose your party, you can change their names. So I was like, oh, thank God.
Okay.
So we've got Jack and Cloud and Pixel and Lexine. We had 2 females, 2 males that we picked. Cloud is funny, but dim-witted. And
cool.
That's just what was chosen. Well, that came with the character, and you're a missionary. It's funny. And Jack is what did I say? Wily but untrusting, something like that.
Something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was.
I don't remember what Pixel and Lexine are, but Lexine is carrying the party. Because she is able to make it so anytime we bargain with people, she can like lower like the rates that, or up like what we can get from people. It's fantastic. And then she's also like, she has points into Wayfinder, so she can see if berries are like good or not. So you're all dead without Lexine. That's all I can say. So if anything happens to her, yeah, you guys are just fucked. We're about, let's see, we made it, I think we've made it through 2/5 of the game, like 2/5 of a run to Oregon at this point. So, yeah, we're about, we're a little over 40% of the way through, like, a run. So, we'll see what happens. I'm hoping to go back to Dragon Quest Monsters after. We'll see. I just almost got to where I could have a king slime last night while we were uncharting.
Hell yeah!
Oregon Trail's a lot of fun, but we have Spookfest soon.
Spookfest soon.
We do have Spookfest soon. We're rapidly approaching, huh?
Yeah, Uncharted 4 is most likely going to be the last, or at least my last stream title before we just jump into Spookfest. Because it's probably going to be 10 streams, maybe? Probably less than that, honestly. It's probably going to be like 7 or 8.
It's like a 15-hour game.
Yeah.
If we do about 2 to 3 hours a stream, it'll be like...
Might be like 5.
5 to 8? 8 I would say 8 at most.
Yeah. We'll see. Before we completely ditch the topic at hand for tonight being visual presentation,
we have to talk about Tillamook. I have more chocolate peanut butter. Thanks.
Okay.
That's been our Tillamook segment.
Cool. Al brought up in the chat, and Pixel would crucify me if I didn't bring it up. Okami looks really good. Good looking game.
Yeah, that's also like a game that follows many examples of what we were talking about. You've got the cell shading, you've got the UI blending with the game's graphics overall to just bolster the experience. So yeah, I was actually thinking about a game too after when we started going past that. No More Heroes.
Is it Paper Mario 64?
No More.
I was gonna bring up No More Heroes. Actually,
No More Heroes has UI elements that are very fun. You've got like the battery, the heart, the way that they do like the pixels for the heart. You've got the the way that it's like a paper-esque aesthetic that like with like weird grungy colors that they go with when you're going to like loading screens and stuff like that, and it's just they have like it has a very distinct style, and I think it looks really cool. So yeah, no, I think so. The thing is, games, you know, game look good. Game look good. Does game look good? Game look good. But speaking of moving on, though, we have been probably maybe up to some new shenanigans in the last couple weeks. So why don't we share with the class what we've been up to?
I just shit myself. That's what I've been up to.
What?
Woo!
Whoa.
It's all over.
That is... Ugh. Well, I guess
Just
that's...
kidding. It was a chunky fart. That's all it was.
That I was gonna say that's the end of the podcast right there. That's how it's ending. No.
So anyway, Jack, what have you been up to? How many shits have you taken today? In your pants?
One actually.
In your pants?
Zero.
Damn.
I like
I'm a poser.
you tried to get him. You tried to get him.
Let's see. What have I been up to lately? I think when was our last podcast?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the 17th. Correct.
Literally the day after the last podcast, I saw Jeff Rosenstock and Chris Farron, and it was probably my favorite time seeing Jeff Rosenstock live.
Damn.
It was my 9th time seeing him, and it was fucking great. I loved it.
He's only good after seeing him 9 times, folks. Just remember.
only 9 times.
Those first 8 fucking suck. Once you get to 9, you're in for a pretty mediocre show.
I was in it for the long haul.
It's the long game. Now you're gonna start saying every time you've gone to see him, it was fucking great. Like every single time.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, on this past Saturday, I went to Fried Fest, which is a small festival in north central Indiana, which is mostly like Indiana and surrounding area, like heavy music, mostly death metal and hardcore. And it's really it was really fun. The weather was perfect. The entire fest is just like in a garage in the middle of nowhere, and there's just like a big fucking yard where people just like tailgate and hang out, and just it's fun. I had a shitload of hot dogs and I had a lot of beer, and it was a great time. And I only got sunburned a little bit.
Just a little bit. As a treat.
Just the tip.
That's about it though for what I've been up to.
Last 2 weeks have felt like it's been so, for me, it's felt like it's been so much longer than 2 weeks. Like it does not feel like it's only been 2 weeks. It feels like it's been forever. There's been a lot going on. At work, we are doing remodeling, so a lot of stuff is changing around. Like all of our grocery aisles are like swapping around, and we are getting our break rooms and bathrooms and everything is just getting changed. So that's been a bit to adapt to. Like we had like a local credit union bank that had an office up at the front of our store, and they stopped using that office and they moved out. So we were actually able to use what was the bank as the new break room. Now granted, it doesn't have everything that the old break room had. Like, it doesn't have a sink, but yeah, I know, it's weird. But it is right next to the restrooms up at the front. So it is quicker to go to the bathroom at least, because in the last time, like the break room in the back is kind of far. You have to like go all the way to like this middle portion and then like turn in order to have like the bathroom. So, I mean, it's pros and cons, but it's much smaller. So we're waiting to get like the renovations through so we can go back to the actual break room. I've been playing Final Fantasy VI, not quite as hard as I was like going into like the other games. I think I'm just kind of like trying to like take it slow now, but I am almost done with it. I got to the back half of the game, which a lot of people tend to talk a lot about with the World of Ruin. I am...
But Cloud, did you wait for Shadow?
He hasn't gotten to that point yet, actually.
Yes, I waited for Shadow, but I might still have to wait.
To
I might still have to wait for Shadow.
You need to still wait for Shadow.
Yeah. Just in case.
Just in case. He's in my party, but I should wait for him. But yeah, no, I am enjoying the game a lot. I don't want to fully share all of my thoughts on the game until after I've beaten it, so I will wait for that. And then, yeah, that's pretty much been it with me. I mean, there's other stuff, but like, not really anything interesting to bring up during like podcast talk. So like, yeah, just that's it.
Let's see. So recently I've gotten back into Sandland. It was on pause for a bit because Sea of Stars and some other stuff, but I am in the middle of the final story mission. And I will say it's very interesting. The back half of Sandland, the video game, is in a lot of ways very different from Sandland the anime. Like, there is a lot of extra characters that play into the story. Some of the major story beats still happen between the two, but there are some like pretty big differences as well.
I still have to finish the second half of the anime. I only like watched a couple episodes. I have like a few more left to do.
Do it.
And then Jack needs to watch it so we can do a review.
Yeah, and then you both have to play the game so Jack can do a review, and we just sit here and stare at our hands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just leaving me to do it, huh?
Yeah, even though we played the game
Yeah.
and watched the anime.
Why would you stare at your hands?
I don't know. That's just what I said. That's the words that came out of my mouth.
You were taken aback when I questioned you on that.
Listen,
Stop that.
I don't know.
Maybe he drew Dokkan Battle into his hands so that just in case if he ends up in prison, he can still look at Dokkan Battle through his hands.
Doku, do it.
See, Landon, if Landon is ever in prison, you know how like they'll like cut a hole into like a Bible to put like a pack of cigarettes in there? For Landon, it's a phone with Dokkan Battle on it.
Literally get service in jail.
Literally nothing else on the phone, just Dokkan Battle.
That's
okay. That's why would I don't need to contact the outside world. I've got Dokkan Battle. Actually,
Yeah.
Can I also just, can I have a credit card so I can just buy Dragonstones? Or do I have to go strictly free to play at that point?
You have to go free to play.
I think you would have to go free to play.
They're not gonna give you money. You're in prison.
Well, they're not going to give you a phone either. You sneak it in. That's what the Bible is for.
All right. Anyway, so there's the Sandland game. I will report back once I actually finish it. And give like Cloud a more in detailed description of the game. Another game I started, the new Dempamen, the new free to play Switch game. It is a video game, that is for sure.
It's a video game.
A lot of people online have been complaining about the translation, and it is rough, but for the most part, the message gets across.
It's the Dempamen,
rough.
so like the game is silly anyway. So if the translation is a little silly at points, that just adds to the charm, right?
I wouldn't say it's silly. I would say it's poor, but those are both words.
I'm being
you
charitable.
can use to describe words. You are. No, that's fair. That's fair. It's still fun, but I could do without the free to play or like the pay to win elements, like the
Yeah,
Like
I was gonna say, let's call a spade a spade. Free-to-play games are called free-to-play to try to get you in, but they're all actually pay-to-win games. That is what they are.
Yeah.
So I will say, from what I played, and granted, I played, I think, 3 story dungeons. Like, you don't have to buy shit.
Yeah, so
at least that far.
My girlfriend's been playing the new Denpaman on and off. I mean, she stopped paying as much attention because she started playing Famicom Detective Club. But when she was playing the new Denpaman, I mean, she played quite a lot, and she never forked out any money for it. So,
yeah. I still would rather they just gave us Denpaman 1 through 3 on the Switch and charged me, I don't know, $200. I would have been fine.
$200? You'd pay $65 a game?
Fuck it. Okay. For those $10 eShop games, fuck it.
Just call it inflation, quote unquote.
Inflation. They had to improve a graphic.
Just one graphic.
Just like the graphic of a banana.
I was gonna say, not even a character graphic, just like a random rock.
No. So I would say the game is fine. I would recommend checking it out just because it is free to play. The barrier for entry is negligible, so try it. The mechanics transition over pretty well to the Switch. Because the biggest thing was use the gyroscope in your 3DS to look and catch a Denpaman or 20 or whatever the fuck. So that aspect is still there. It's just you're timed on how many dungeons you go in unless you pay shit. And then there's certain items that are tied to currencies and stuff. And then they have different events going on, but there's fishing, so the game's perfect, actually.
All right.
There you go.
So
one last quick thing, since I get to edit, and we're not even at 2 hours, so who fucking cares? I've been watching Tokyo Vice on Max. I've been really enjoying that. Unfortunately, season 2 is the last season, so fuck it. I'm actually going to ask for the book it's based off of because I really like the story that the reporter that goes through. You're waving your finger.
I'll wait till you're done. I'll
Okay.
wait till you're done.
And then last thing, earlier this week I watched Deadpool and Wolverine. I enjoyed it. That's all I'll say.
Where would you rank it among the other Deadpool movies? From what most people have said, it's good but worse than the first 2.
I think I liked it more than number 2. I think number 1 is my favorite still of the 3.
Yeah.
But the fight scenes in this are super solid.
Okay.
Where it falls a little flat is definitely the story is there, but the supporting cast from the last 2 are there for 2 scenes, and almost none of them have more than a speaking line.
Yeah.
Except for Blind Al, who's perfect in all ways. And it really just focuses on Deadpool and Wolverine, and then there's a bunch of cameos in the background. And some of those are really cool. It was even with my limited knowledge of the X-Men verse that Fox had, there was still a lot of cool stuff that the movie pays homage to. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
You reminded me because you mentioned watching things, and I do that sometimes.
He did doo-doo his pants.
I did.
He lied to me earlier.
It was my surprise. No, a while ago, Bethany and I started watching, or I started showing Bethany Better Call Saul, because we finished Breaking Bad a while ago, and we were going to move on to that. That started in I want to say December of last year.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning
and
it.
For a while, we put it off because we got sick a few times, we were busy, etc. Recently, though, we got back into it and we just like powered through the rest of the series, and we just finished it the other day. And goddamn, what a good fucking show that is. Like, one of my favorite like TV series of all time. I would argue I like it more than Breaking Bad even. Yeah, it's so good.
He is a fun character. I've seen a bit of Better Call Saul, and I will say it's a great character.
If you want to get into it, definitely you have to watch Breaking Bad first, because even if Better Call Saul is a prequel series, it like the context of the original series is important for sure. Because a lot of it does play into Better Call Saul, but yeah, it's fucking fantastic. And that's all I got.
Okay. So I believe that is everything. All right, we will see you guys next time. I'm not 100% certain what we're going to be doing for the next episode, so no spoilers for that. Thank you all for tuning in. Catch you guys later. We have all those other social media thingies. Roll the outro. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Gaming Stooges Talks podcast. If you enjoyed us, consider subscribing to our podcast RSS feed, or follow us on youtube.com/GamingStooges and twitch.tv/GamingStooges for more gaming content. If you'd like to chat with us, join our Discord. The link can be found in the episode description. We also want to thank all of our Patreon supporters. Your continued support means a lot to us. Not already one? Please take a look at what we have to offer anyone who becomes a patron at patreon.com/GamingStooges. See you next time!